The realm. Do you know what the realm is? It's the 1,000 blades of Aegon's enemies. A story we agree to tell each other over and over till we forget that it's a lie.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome back for another Game of Thrones video. What I want to do today is discuss the new series HBO is currently working on. About a year ago, HBO did announce they were starting to work on 5 different shows that would be based on George R.R. Martin's A Song of Ice and Fire universe. One of these shows was said to take place during the Age of Heroes, and at the time, George R.R. Martin said it would be called The Long Night, but as of right now, it looks like they will be calling the show Blood Moon. I actually really like that name. Since this new show is set during the Age of Heroes, it will be very different from Game of Thrones. This means there will be no King's Landing, no Iron Throne, and most likely no dragons as well. There is a social media account that has been given some updates on the show. It does look like they are getting ready to start filming any day. One of these photos even looks like they will be filming at the Winterfell set, which does have me excited. The very first description we got of the show does give us some hints about what we can expect to see. This series chronicles the world's descent from the Golden Age of Heroes into its darkest hour. From the horrifying secrets of Westeros' history to the true origin of the White Walkers, the mysteries of the East to the Starks of legend. It's not the story we think we know. Now, one thing from that description that always gets my attention is the fact that it says we will learn the true origin of the White Walkers. I already thought this was shown in Game of Thrones during one of Bran Stark's flashbacks. In Season 6, we were shown how the Night King was created, and they even said why they did this. However, based on the description of this new show, it says this one will give us the actual origin of the White Walkers. I also think that's why it says it's not the story we think we know. So, what are some of the things that we could see from the new show? Well, the Age of Heroes lasted for thousands of years, in which kingdoms rose and fell, noble houses were founded and withered away, and great deeds were accomplished. Yet what we truly know of those ancient days is hardly more than what we know of the Dawn Age. The tales we have now are the work of septons and maesters writing thousands of years after the fact. Since this show is said to go from the Golden Age of Heroes into its darkest hour, it sounds like we will see the Long Night. That's most likely why George R.R. Martin was originally calling the show The Long Night.
Fear is for the winter, when the snows fall 100 feet deep. Fear is for the long night, when the sun hides for years, and children are born and live and die, all in darkness. That is the time for fear, my little lord, when the White Walkers move through the woods.
Like it says, we will see how the White Walkers were actually created, and we will see them ride down on the winds of winter to invade Westeros. Now, during this time, there is no wall, there is no Night's Watch, and there is no Winterfell. So it will be very interesting to see how they do fight the White Walkers. One of the few stories we do have about the Long Night is of a legendary figure known as the Last Hero. In the North, they tell of a last hero who sought out the children of the forest, his companions abandoning him or dying one by one as they faced ravenous giants, cold servants, and the others themselves. Alone, he finally did reach the children, despite the efforts of the White Walkers, and all the tales agree that this was the turning point. Thanks to the children, the first men of the Night's Watch banded together and were able to fight and win the Battle for the Dawn, the last battle that broke the endless winter and sent the others fleeing to the icy north. Now, it says that they were the first men of the Night's Watch, but technically the Night's Watch wasn't created yet. What I think happened was, as soon as the White Walkers fled back into the north, this is when they constructed the wall, then had those men guard the wall to make sure the White Walkers never came back. That's when I think the Night's Watch was actually founded. So, although this isn't Game of Thrones, it will have several of the same ingredients that made the show so great. We will basically get to see how all of it started. We have heard that the wall was built by Brandon the Builder, who essentially founded House Stark and built Winterfell. The legends also say Brandon had help from the giants, as well as the children of the forest using their magic to keep the White Walkers out. I'm guessing it's the same kind of magic we saw at the Three-Eyed Raven's cave. Now, I do wonder, was that really how the wall was made, or was it actually made by the White Walkers themselves for some other reason? That I would like to know. I would also be very interested in getting to see how the Night's Watch was actually created. I have always wondered who the first Lord Commander of the Night's Watch was. Maybe it was even the last hero. Also, who is the last hero? Was he a Stark or someone else? Now, right after the Long Night ends is when it is said that Brandon the Builder made the Crypts of Winterfell first, then the Winterfell Castle was slowly added over time. Why did he build the Crypts of Winterfell? Who are those very old kings of winter that are locked up in the lowest and darkest levels? There are many references to those kings of winter having eyes made of ice. I've always had a very good feeling that's where the first Night's King was buried, and maybe even the Night's Queen, as well as the other White Walkers. These are some of the very interesting things we could see from the new show. We could finally get the big reveal about how the Starks and the White Walkers are actually related. This could really be shown if we got to see the 13th Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. As of right now, this is the only Night's King we have heard about in the books, and this Night's King was a Stark, according to Old Nan's bedtime story. I would love to see this story come to life on the new show. Imagine if this show started very similar to how Game of Thrones started, where we see a young man from House Stark want to become a member of the Night's Watch, very similar to Jon Snow. We could see this young man join the Night's Watch, then rise up through the ranks to go on and become the 13th Lord Commander. Again, very similar to Jon Snow. But then, one day something begins to appear out from behind the trees. As this Stark is standing on top of the wall, he notices a woman whose skin is as white as the moon and whose eyes are like blue stars. This Stark was not afraid when he saw her. In fact, he even chased her and eventually does bring her back to the Night Fort. This is still very similar to Jon Snow's story because he too did fall in love with a woman from beyond the wall. Only in this story, this woman just so happens to sound like a female White Walker. This is when the Lord Commander, who is a Stark, begins to turn to the dark side. They begin to sleep together, and when he gives her his seed, he is also giving her his soul. Now imagine if we were following this character for all of these years. We would like the character, and we would want to see the character succeed, especially being a member from House Stark, a house that most fans do like. But how would you begin to feel if you saw this character begin to turn to the dark side? So dark that they even start sleeping with a White Walker. We have never seen a female White Walker before. Imagine how incredible that would be just to see that. I would also imagine that this White Walker would have to be gorgeous and maybe even charming in some way. But that's only until she turns this Stark into the Night's King. Then they begin to have babies together. And that's when they start sacrificing these babies to the other White Walkers that are still beyond the wall. How would you feel about that Stark then? Also, how would you feel about those White Walkers who you would know had Stark's blood? It was very different when we knew they were Craster's sons because no one liked Craster. Not to mention he was basically forcing his daughters to have babies by him. So it wasn't really bothering anyone when the White Walkers were killed. But what if you knew those White Walkers were coming from a Stark, who we had followed for several seasons? A character who we once wanted to see win, but now he's given away his innocent children to become White Walkers. I think some of us would feel slightly different when and if those White Walkers eventually invaded Westeros. Now, according to legend, the Stark in Winterfell eventually finds out what his brother is up to at the Night's Watch. So he ends up joining forces with the King Beyond the Wall, and together they bring down the Night's King and the Night's Queen. That could also be a very interesting story to tell, because we would know both of those characters, and we would know both of those characters were actually brothers. If they were able to tell the story right, this time we could actually have some sort of an emotional connection to the White Walkers and the Night's King. I think that would make for a far more interesting story than the one we got in Game of Thrones. Now, they never do say what the Stark in Winterfell does with their bodies after they're killed. Something tells me he had them locked up down in the crypts of Winterfell, and that's why there are iron swords laying across the laps of the statues. It is said that those iron swords help keep the vengeful spirits locked within the crypts, and we have been told that the White Walkers do not like iron. So when you think about it, it does kind of make sense that something a little more sinister is down within the crypts of Winterfell. I have made some other videos about this before, where I show all the different connections between the White Walkers and House Stark. If you are interested in learning more about that, then I will leave that video linked down below. I think it's one of my best videos I ever made, if I do say so myself. Anyways, I only wanted to discuss some of the things that we could see in the upcoming show that has the working title, Blood Moon. Based on the description and some of the early set photos that are out right now, we should find out a lot more about House Stark as well as the White Walkers. Since it also says we will find out some of Westeros' horrifying secrets, I am hoping one of those secrets is about how the Starks are actually related to the White Walkers. Some of the articles I read said that we could see this show as early as 1 year after Game of Thrones is over, so that's actually not too far away. Although Game of Thrones did not end the way I was hoping, I am still very excited about this new show HBO is creating. I love the A Song of Ice and Fire universe, therefore I will watch about anything relating to the source material. Let me know what you think. Leave me some of your thoughts down below. Anyways, I want to thank everyone for watching the video, as well as everyone supporting the channel. I hope you all have a great day. I will see you again very soon. Bye.